Welcome to the Building Confident Readers training. This 30-minute session will cover early reading and best practices, stories and word activities, and helpful hints for working with a struggling or reluctant reader. Please don't worry about making notes during this training. You will be able to review this video and others in the e-learning center at your convenience. If you've had any exposure to 5 to 7-year-olds, you might have heard the term phonics, but may not know how it impacts early reading. Phonics is a way of teaching children how to read and write. It helps children hear, identify, and use different sounds that distinguish one word from another in the English language. Please be reassured that we're not expecting you to be an expert in phonics. That is the teacher's role. Your role is to provide supported reading practice and help your student gain confidence in their ability to read fluently. Having an understanding of the role phonics plays in early reading will help you support your student as you read with them each week. Phonics involves matching sounds with letters or groups of letters. Learning how letters sound when they're combined will help children decode words as they read. This is particularly helpful when trying to sound out unfamiliar words. For example, when a child is taught the sounds for the letters T, P, A, and S, they can start to build the words tap, pat, and sat. As you will learn later in this video, our story library includes stories specifically created to help students practice decoding words. When students can learn the art of decoding words, they are well on their way to becoming fluent readers. Let's turn to the types of activities you can do as part of your reading session with your student. Prior to your session, the classroom computer will be sitting in a virtual queue waiting for you to connect. When your call is answered and you indicate that your student is available, your computer connects with the classroom computer in the virtual queue. Unlike screen sharing, your computer and the classroom computer are independent, even though they display the same material. You control the session and decide what activities to show to your student. When working with your student, there may be times when it is unclear if the student is viewing the same material as you. Click on the View icon at the top of the screen, and a window will appear that shows you what your student ought to see on their screen. This will help you direct them if they are unsure what to do or if it's unclear they're viewing what you sent. This feature is a guide only and should not replace reaching out to chat support for assistance. The first step to getting started with the activities will be to select your student's reading level. This is done for both flashcards and stories. Let's take a moment to talk about the reading levels on the Chapter 1 platform. At the beginning of the year, each student is assessed by their teacher and assigned a reading level range based on word knowledge, comprehension, and fluency. The students selected for the program will be emerging readers who have mastered letter names and letter sounds and are now ready to focus on learning to sound out and read simple words. Making sure students are reading within a correct range throughout the year is important to their success. If a child struggles consistently with a text and gets frustrated, they are likely to want to give up. The opposite is also true. If a student is reading material easily and understands the meaning of what they've read, it's time to move them to more challenging reading material to fend off boredom. To provide your student with the best possible experience, we have divided the skills practiced during your sessions into two categories: activities and stories. Our activities focus on phonics, word knowledge, and vocabulary, and our stories include a range of texts that support children as they learn to decode words. Stories also give students practice with fluency and comprehension. It's important to note that activities and stories follow different leveling systems, and those levels should be moved independently as your student progresses. At the beginning of the year, your student will be assigned both an activity level and a story level. Each time you log into the platform for a session, you will see the most recent activity and story level that was presented to the student. What is important to remember is that you have the ability, as does your teacher, to move your student up or down the activity and story levels based on his or her progress. Let's start by looking at activity levels. Activity levels are the same for both flashcards and word activities. These levels follow a numeric leveling structure that goes from 1 to 9. The lowest level, level 1, includes basic words learned in late kindergarten and early first grade. These are words that should be learned by sight. Level 1 also includes words that can be decoded using the sounds children are learning in their phonics lessons. The highest level, level 9, includes more challenging words learned in late first grade and early second grade. As you move your students' activity level up or down, the words found in both flashcards and the activities will change based on the level you select. Story levels follow a different system and are more closely aligned with where a student falls within a grade level. Story levels begin at KS, or Kindergarten Spring, and go through G2 MLY, or Grade 2, Middle of the Year. Please don't worry about memorizing the story levels. We provide an easy-to-access list of levels in the platform to help you locate the next level in the sequence. At the lower story levels, the text will be very short and simple. We've done this deliberately to help build the confidence of an early reader by exposing them to sounds they have already been taught in class. It's important for children to practice reading at a level that is neither too easy nor too difficult. The goal is for your student to read aloud with confidence, practicing the sounds they have learned in class. If the student is flying through the text and they understand the meaning of what they've read, then it's time to move them to the next story level in the program. If you find the material is too difficult for your student, you can always move them back to the previous story level and then try advancing them again the following week. As explained earlier, teachers can also update the child's story levels. If they do, the new level will be displayed when you log in for your reading session. Remember, the platform will always display the last level changed in the system by either you or the classroom teacher for both activities and stories. Now, let's turn to a demonstration of the reading activities and guidance on how to structure your reading sessions. In addition to providing stories for practicing reading and fluency skills, we also provide students with word games designed to build their knowledge of words and word parts. You can fit these in between stories to break up reading or offer children a chance to do them before you say goodbye for the week. While we have suggestions about the time you could spend on each activity, do remember that this is not set in stone. Feel free to experiment with what works best for you and the child you're supporting. The first activity in the sequence is flashcards. We recommend you start your reading session with flashcards. This is a great way for your student to practice their decoding and sight word skills and prepare for the reading session. The platform divides flashcards into letter names, letter sounds, onsets and rhymes, and sight words. Letter names provide practice with letter recognition. In this Level 1 activity, students will identify letter names. Learning initial letter sounds is an important step in learning how to read simple words. In this Level 2 activity, students will practice reading words that begin with the same letter. To help students recognize common word patterns, Levels 3 to 9 include practice with onsets and rhymes. Children will learn to pull apart or chunk word parts and then blend them back together again to sound out difficult words. We cover this in more detail in the Reading Practice Tips video found in the Learning Center. Sight word flashcards in Levels 2 to 6 provide practice identifying words that are frequently found in early grade text. These words are difficult to sound out, and children should learn to recognize them by sight. Feel free to move between the flashcard tabs during your reading session. What follows is a description of how the flashcard activities work. If you need a refresher, directions are always available and can be expanded and closed as needed. Select an activity from the tabs presented based on the level selected. Using Level 3 as an example, select a group of letters from the tiles in the lower part of the screen. Words starting with or containing that sound will display in the gray practice box. Notice the first word is highlighted purple. This word will immediately be visible to your student. Ask your student to read the word. It may help your student to see the sound used in a sentence. To show the student a sentence that uses words in the practice box, click on the Silly Sentence tab. Your student will see the sentence on their screen and should read it back to you. If there is more than one practice sentence, use the arrows to move between them. The chant feature is a tool that will help the student remember a difficult word. Chants use rhythm to help students recall words, and the repetitive nature of chants also promotes fluent reading.
D, d,
Ought, ought, ought,
d,
ought, dot.
As your student reads the words in the practice box, you can mark the practice set green or red based on the child's knowledge of all the words. If a child can read all the words in the practice box, click the green button. This will mark the letter, word, or word ending green. If you think the practice set needs more work, click the red button. The platform will remember this for your next session. The child will not see this assessment, it's visible only to you. All the child will see are the words, sentences, or chants you select. When marking sounds green or red, the goal is for your student to read most or all of the words in the practice set before marking that sound green. It's up to you to determine if your student has sufficiently mastered the words in the practice box. Now let's review the sight words in flashcards. Sight words are specific words that children need to learn by sight and appear in levels 2 to 6. You can click on a word and it will immediately be visible to your student. You can mark each word as known or unknown using the green and red buttons. The platform will remember this for your next session. Again, your student will not see this assessment. If your students struggle sounding out a word, use the I do, we do, and you do technique. You read the word, you and your student read the word together, your student reads the word alone. This will build their confidence and model the idea of blending sounds. The next activity in the series is stories. Reading stories out loud is the most important thing your student will do, as it's where he or she gets a chance to practice reading. You should ideally spend 15 to 20 minutes of your session each week reading stories, but each child will be different, and some may not be able to concentrate on reading for that long earlier in the year. When you're ready to read stories, click on the story icon from the activity menu. The story level that your child is reading at will always be displayed in the yellow box at the top of the screen. Remember, you are free to change the levels as the child progresses. Teachers may also update levels, and if they do, you will notice the child's level has changed the next time you log on for a reading session. The student will tell you what story they would like to read by giving you the number next to the story title. Select the story and your student can start reading. Let's take a look at a typical story and make sure it's clear what you do and what your student will see. When you choose a story from the library, the child will see the title page of that story on their screen. Often the names of the author and illustrator are also displayed here. These can be complicated words, so you may wish to read these to your student. Please note that this title page may also contain a challenge word. This is a word that the child will not know at their reading level. Please read this word out loud to your student and discuss its meaning. Now it's time to move into the story. While you can advance the stories forward using the arrow keys, your student will not have that option and can only see the page number. You might decide to look through the whole book with your student before reading it. You can mention some of the key or challenging words and give them a sense of the story before they read it, which can boost the confidence of early readers. You may also want to take turns reading with your student if they struggle or are reluctant to read. You could alternate reading each page. This is a good way of taking the pressure off and modeling fluent, expressive reading. Depending on what level your student is reading at, there are two different types of stories to choose from: reading stories and decodable stories. Reading stories are included at each reading level and use words that students are learning in first grade. By reading these stories, students are increasing their word knowledge and practicing newly learned words. At the higher levels, reading stories also include a variety of subjects such as science, global experiences, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. These stories can inspire and create human connections by giving children exposure to other cultures, traditions, and experiences. You'll remember from our early discussion about phonics, it's important for students to learn how to decode words. Decodable stories found in the lower levels are a great tool for early readers because the words are easier to decode. The repeated readings of the decodable stories help readers with fluency and word recognition, especially as it relates to phonics patterns and high-frequency words students see often in first grade text. As you read, you may want your student to focus on a particular word. You can do this in two ways. First, you can click on a word on your screen, which will highlight the word on the child's view of the page, or you can show that word to your student by typing in the message box. For example, if your student is struggling with the word sing, You can type the word or its individual letters in the message student box and send that word to your student. Remind them to sound it out using their phonics, but don't hesitate to give them the word if they seem stuck. When you send the word to your student in this way, it will appear for them as if spoken by a small owl in the top left of the screen. Asking them what the owl is saying is a good way to check they can see the word you've sent. If you selected I Speak Spanish when you registered, you may be paired with an early English language learner. When reading stories with your student, you will have the option to toggle between the English and Spanish version of a story. This will help support word learning if your student is struggling with the passage in English. If the student is struggling with the English version of the text, flip to the Spanish version. Reading the passage in Spanish will help the student better understand the context of the story when reading the same passage in English. Now that you understand how to use the story area of the platform, let's talk about how you can help your student practice their reading skills. The time you spend practicing reading with your student, encouraging them and praising their efforts, will create a safe environment where they can learn and grow. Don't underestimate the impact you will have on your student. Something as simple as sharing your own enthusiasm and love for reading is a powerful tool. While we're not asking you to be an expert in phonics or early education, it is helpful to understand the skills students need as they work towards becoming better readers. Once children have mastered letter sounds, there are 4 components to becoming a proficient reader. The first is having a strong oral vocabulary. The second is having enough knowledge of the world to give context to what the student is reading. The third is being able to read a passage fluently. And the fourth is being able to comprehend that passage. These are all interrelated, and during the course of the year with your student, you will help them build these skills. The skill we would like you to focus on with your student is fluency. Fluency is the ability to read a passage with reasonable speed and expression so that it sounds natural. When reading fluently, the student doesn't need to expend too much processing power on a particular word and can think about the story in its totality. The key skill a student will need in order to read fluently is called word attack. Word attack is learning how to read words that are not easily read by sight. For these words, the student needs to have some form of phonics-based strategy in order to sound out the word. Our word attack strategy has 3 simple components: chunk it, flip it, and skip it. Let's look at a simple sentence. I have a plan. The student will likely know the first 3 words by sight. However, the last word, plan, the student is unlikely to know by sight. In order to understand the sentence, the student will need to know some kind of phonics strategy to sound out the word. The student may try to sound out each letter and then blend them together, but that is difficult for a 6-year-old and may lead to frustration. The word attack we recommend is called chunking. Every syllable has chunks, also known as onsets and rhymes. The onset is the letter that comes before the first vowel, and the rhyme are the letters that follow the first vowel. In our example, plan, pl is the onset and an is the rhyme. When a student comes across a difficult word and knows how to use the chunking strategy, they can sound out each chunk, pl, an, to attack that difficult word. The second strategy is called flip it. Flipping a vowel sound can help a student make sense of a word that is difficult to sound out. For example, when sounding out the word table, the student is likely to sound out using a short vowel sound, such as ta. Coaching the student to flip the short vowel sound for a long vowel sound will help the student sound out the word. The third strategy is called skip it. While we want students to give the word a try, we don't want them to dwell too long on a word they just can't seem to identify. Have your student continue reading the sentence and return to the difficult word after finishing the story. In addition to word attack skills, blending and sounding out, children also need encouragement to enjoy and understand the stories you read together. Asking questions about the story is a good way to see if your student is able to remember key points of the story. But helping a child develop their comprehension skills is about much more than asking questions to test their memory. Comprehension is about developing connections between what they have seen in the book and the world they understand. Can the student tell you about the story in their own words, or make connections between the story and their own experiences? How would they feel if they were a character in the story? Having empathy with characters helps create thoughtful readers. Not all stories include comprehension questions, but feel free to spend time asking your student about the story when you're finished reading. Did they like it? If so, why? You may also want to recap or retell a story at the end as a fun activity. It's a great skill for young readers to develop. If a story does include comprehension questions, they will be presented on your screen at the end of the story. As we mentioned earlier, it can be hard for children to concentrate only on reading stories for a full 30 minutes. That's why our platform also contains 5 word activities that you can choose to use with your student. You'll find that your child will develop firm favorites and enjoy beating you. It's up to you whether you use these at the end of the session before you say goodbye or in between stories to mix things up a little. The games are Word Sort, 3 in a Row, Mystery Word, Word World, and the Whiteboard. What follows is a brief look at each game. To view step-by-step instructions, see the directions sidebar on each page. In the Word Sort activity, students will practice sorting words based on their word endings. This is great practice for students learning how to sound out words. As the volunteer, you will select the word from a list of 9 words you'll see above colored boxes. Your student will see the colored boxes on screen, but will only see the word you select. Ask your student where the word belongs based on the word ending. Once you click on the appropriate box, the word will populate and the student will see the same word in the box on their screen. Once all the words have been placed in a box, draw your student's attention to the similarities of the words. Then ask your student to read the words in each box. 3 in a Row is a favorite activity for many students. This additional exposure to words will help encourage fluent reading and word identification. When you're ready to begin, determine who will be a cross and who will be a naught. Notice each box has a word. Your student can see the same words as you. Taking turns, you and your student will try to be the first to get 3 crosses or naughts in a row, up, down, across, or diagonally. Tell your student to select a box. Before placing the cross or the naught in the box for your student, have the student read the word in the box. When you place a cross or a naught in the box, your student will see the same thing on their screen. Mystery word is a fun way of learning vocabulary and will help students remember the spelling of new words. To begin, think of a word or use one of the suggested words found on the right side of your screen. The student cannot see these words. When you have a word in mind, click on the number of letters of the word. Your student will see the same number of blank spaces on their screen. As your student begins to guess letters, click on the letter on the keyboard. This will highlight that letter for both you and your student. Place your cursor on the appropriate line and select the letter using your computer keyboard. Your student will see each letter on their screen. You may find your student needs a little help getting started with this activity. Consider filling in the first letter or offering a clue to help your student guess the word. Word World is a fun way for students to practice spelling and word patterns. To play, spin the wheel to begin. A word will appear on your screen, but the student will not see the word. The spinner will stop on a letter, which will populate on the student's screen. Click No to continue spinning until there are enough letters for the student to guess what the word might be, or until the student can read the word on the screen. Click Yes when the student guesses the word, or to play the game again. The whiteboard simulates a magnetic board and is great for practicing spelling, difficult words, or making up fun sentences. Type a word or phrase in the field at the bottom of the screen. When you click Submit Word, your student will see the same word or phrase on their screen. You can also move words and phrases around by dragging anywhere on the board. Remember, you will always have a chance to practice activities prior to your session using the practice tool that we covered in the first training. Another helpful tip is to use the Student Preview feature. If you need a visual reminder of what your student should be seeing during an activity, click on the small square screen icon next to the Child Info link at the top of the page. This will enable a pop-up window which will be the representation of the child's screen. If they tell you verbally that they are seeing something different, please reach out to chat support. While it may be tempting to spend more time with your student, please end your session promptly after 30 minutes. There may be another reading volunteer scheduled immediately after your session, and the system only allows for one reading session to be running at a time. To disengage from the session, click on an End link at the top of the page. Please remember to provide us with brief feedback on your reading experience. Your feedback does provide us with helpful information that might impact your next session, as well as the sessions of your fellow teammates. We've tried to make it quick and easy and appreciate your entries. Click the End Session button at the bottom of the feedback form to submit your feedback. You will be redirected to the homepage and can log out of the application. We're often asked by our volunteers for guidance about how best to support the children they're working with. It's helpful to remember that many students chosen by their teachers to participate in the online reading program may struggle from a lack of confidence, and you may encounter children who are very shy and hesitant to read out loud. These children will often find reading difficult and may not be getting the additional reading practice they need at home. Reluctant readers often share particular traits or experiences. They commonly lack confidence. They don't see themselves as readers. They've had negative experiences. They know they find reading hard, and they're afraid of making mistakes. If you are supporting a child who is at the very early stages of learning to read, it's helpful to think about learning to read as being like learning to swim. You begin by being fully supported, and this support is gradually released. You learn one step at a time to feel safe. Repeated practice makes all the difference. You succeed when you're given clear guidance on how to improve. Your success provides the greatest motivation. Common difficulties a child might have in the early stages of reading include difficulty recognizing the separate sounds in a word, for example, the E sound in sheep, difficulty with common words on sight, such as and, the, or for, struggling to blend sounds together, missing or making up words, reading the entire sentence but doesn't understand what it means. If you encounter a child who experiences one of these difficulties, there are strategies you can use to help them master difficult words. You can use the message student box to break the word into word parts. You may want to jot down the difficult word or words and revisit them later in the session using the whiteboard. Consider modeling how to break a word into sounds for them. Sometimes hearing you say the sound as they see it on screen is helpful. For children who struggle to remember sight words like the, one, or for, it's all about repetition. You can highlight these words in a story by clicking on them when they appear on the page. Every time the difficult word appears on the page, click on the word to highlight and draw your students' attention to the word. Over time, the word will become familiar. As you read with your student week after week, you might find the strategies helpful when looking for new ways to keep the child interested in reading. Start the session positively with a comment rather than a question. I've been looking forward to reading with you all day. I can't wait to see what we're going to be reading together. Spend some time reviewing the title page. Comment rather than question. I wonder what this book could be about. Or ask the student questions about what they see on the cover illustration. Can they make a prediction about the story? Create your own story. Go through the story and create your own version or ending together. Read to the student now and then and allow them to simply enjoy the characters and storyline. You may want to stop after each page and ask the student questions about what you just read. Does your reader have a story they love to read? If so, use the revisit and repeat technique. Each time your reader revisits the same story, they become more and more familiar with the sounds that are repeated throughout the story. This repetition helps children remember and sound out words that may have been difficult the first time they read the story. If a child is struggling or seems reluctant, please stick with them and offer them encouragement and praise. It may be that you need to read with your student for less than 30 minutes in the beginning to build up their concentration. You might want to take turns reading and get them to spot any mistakes you make. As you work with your student, keep in mind that rewarding their success is an important component in building reading confidence. It'll boost their self-esteem and make them feel great. While verbal praise is very motivating and should be given often, we also provide several high-five pop-ups you can use to further reward your students' hard work. When giving praise, explain what it was they did so well. Let them know why you feel it deserves praise. Remember, it's not just about the result, it's about the effort. I really like the way you blended all of the sounds together. I can see you've been practicing that difficult word. The way you changed B for D when you got confused really helped you to read that word. You should be really proud of yourself because you kept reading right to the end. Sometimes you might find that your session coincides with another class activity that your student is keen to participate in and which they ask you if they can go back to. Please don't be disheartened if this happens. If this happens regularly, send a quick message to the teacher, consider changing the session time if you can, or let us know. Occasionally, you may find your struggling reader may appear to be uninterested or be easily distracted. They may even tell you they don't want to read and display challenging behavior. Do remember that being a child is hard work. Each day they're learning a huge amount about the world around them. Keep in mind that something may have happened in their day to unsettle them. Perhaps they had an argument with a best friend. What can seem like a small thing to an adult could be upsetting to a child. If a child's behavior is challenging in a session, try following these steps. Make a simple, clear request. Gemma, shall we focus on reading the story? Make a closed request. Thank you for focusing so well on the story, Gemma. Frame a positive choice. Gemma, are you able to focus on reading with me, or do we need to stop reading for today? Lastly, if your session doesn't go to plan, remember it's not likely to be about you. Reflect afterwards on whether you could have done anything differently. And if over time you feel that you're not making progress, contact the child's teacher for advice using the messaging part of the platform. Or contact us, and we will reach out to the teacher for you. You and your assigned student will work together for the entire school year. As you work together, be sure to document their progress in the session notes section of the portal. You will be amazed at the growth your student will achieve by the end of the school year. Please remember that the session notes section is for your reference only and a good way to track what you've worked on each week. You can take notes during a session or after the session is over by clicking on the session notes link. The child's teacher will not see these notes. When calling the classroom for your session, keep in mind that early grade classrooms are very busy and can be unpredictable. Young students are always on the move, which means that your calls may not be answered straight away and may occasionally be missed. Please try calling back if you do not receive an answer on the first attempt. Sometimes it takes a little longer for the phone greeter to answer the call. If you still do not get an answer after a second attempt, contact the support desk so that they can check the equipment for you. Classrooms full of young children can also get very noisy, and some classroom activities can create a lot of commotion. If you find that a noisy classroom consistently interferes with your reading session, please report this to live chat support as they might be able to help. During the school year, when geography permits, we encourage reading volunteers to take advantage of opportunities to meet with their students in person or virtually. This may include a fall meet and greet and the year-end celebration. The early year meet and greet typically takes place in November through January and is a short virtual meeting where you and your fellow reading volunteers can meet with the classroom teacher and your students. At the end of each year, we encourage our reading volunteers to visit their school and celebrate the great reading work done with their students during the school year. For reading volunteer teams who are not able to travel to the school, we will attempt to organize a virtual meeting so you can see your student if the school is able to facilitate this. Whether these are virtual or in-person events, they are a wonderful part of the Chapter 1 experience for teachers, reading volunteers, and students, and you won't want to miss out. We've now reached the end of the Confident Readers training. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our program. Do remember that you have access to all content as well as FAQs in the Learning Center.